Hi class, my name is Jenna Buchanan, and I did the chapter summary on Chapter 3, Assessment and Individualized Interventions. One thing at the beginning of the chapter that I read and I thought was pretty critical to this chapter was that all children's progress is at their own rate, but developmental sequences are usually at the same time, and I think that's pretty important to keep in mind when developing individualized interventions. EDSC professionals use assessments to begin the process of developing individualized programs for children. There are 4 different types of assessments. There's norm reference assessments, criterion reference assessments, play-based assessments, and judgment-based assessments. Norm reference assessments compares a child's performance to that of other children that are the same age. These tools require a standardized assessment protocol and specific material so a comparison can be made to norms derived from a population of children. There is a basal age, which means that all items can be passed, and a ceiling age, that only one item can be passed. I'll go over the advantages and disadvantages, but for all of the assessments I didn't list them, but I put the page number in the book. So some advantages to the norm referenced assessments are that they compare children to others the same age for eligibility and classification purposes, report reliability and validity information, and can usually be given in less than 1 hour. Some of the disadvantages are that they commonly compare children with disabilities to children without disabilities. They may provide little information about how a child learns, are given in assessment setting, not in a natural environment, may provide little help in identifying functional appropriate objectives, may provide little information about why a child cannot complete an item satisfactorily, and may be biased against children with motor, emotional, sensory, or communication impairments and/or delays, and children from culturally and/or linguistically diverse backgrounds. Criterion reference assessments compares a child to designated standards. It determines a child's completion of specific skills and objectives, so pass, no pass, or emerging. Subtests are given in an order that is appropriate for the type of learner the child is and includes clinical judgment with results to measure their abilities. Some advantages to this type of assessment form are that they encourage comparing a child to himself, herself for monitoring and/or herself for monitoring purposes. They usually offer a continuum of skills that are appropriate for programming, allow professionals to adapt or modify items and/or tasks to better reflect a child's competence as long as modifications and adaptations are reported. They frequently are linked to the curricula, usually may be administered individually or in small groups, may allow individual subtests to be given at different times, and may be given in natural environments. Some of the disadvantages are that they may be time-consuming to the administrator, may have some items that are not appropriate for functional for all children, and may be biased against children with motor, emotional, sensory, or communication impairments and/or delays, and children from culturally linguistic diverse backgrounds. So some of the same disadvantages as the norm or forced assessments. So play-based assessments are semi-structured arrangements are made for the child to play. The play is critical to bringing out the child's natural behavior in developmental areas such as cognitive, social, emotional, motor, and communication areas. Parents are usually key to this assessment just because you want it to be a natural environment, and parents are usually pretty involved in the child's play. So it will give you a good look at the natural behaviors of the child. Checklists, direct observations, parental reports, and criterion referenced assessments are the only things that may be used when assessing the play-based assessments. Some advantages are they render a typical sample for a child's behavior. They render a sample of a child's interaction with an adult and materials and occasionally with another child, and may produce a more comprehensive sample of behavior for children who are non-compliant or slow to establish rapport. Some of the disadvantages of play-based assessments are that they are more than one testing, they may require more than one testing session to gather sufficient information about a child's functioning and can be time-consuming. Judgment-based assessments. These assessments are based on the professional's opinion and observations on the child's behavior and development. Useful for children who may be difficult to assess if using other methods. It is the professional's job to decide what the child is capable of with regards to the delays or impairments involved. And objective data and subjective data are used. So an example that they gave in the book of objective data is that Michael opened his mouth 1 inch when the food was brought towards his face. And an example for a subjective data that they used was Michael smiled more when eating raspberry yogurt than plain. He seems to prefer the sweeter taste. Some disadvantages, or some advantages of judgment-based assessments are they rely on professionals' clinical judgment and perceptions. They may document areas of competence that are not evaluated by other assessments, so families and professionals have a more complete picture of the child's abilities, including task, persistence, ability to redirect, and adjustment to environmental changes. They may help professionals and family members focus on strengths and the functionality of non-traditional responses to stimuli. May be used to document small skill and/or behavior changes that are not reported by other assessments, and may be useful in analyzing environmental factors that influence, enhance, or hinder a child's performance and behavior. Some of the disadvantages are that they rely on the professional's clinical judgment and perception, and thus may be prone to evaluator bias. They are time-consuming, and different professionals may generate different results using the same tools. So, the purpose of these assessments are to gather information such as skills, behaviors that are present, if skills are being generalized, how a child attempted a task, why a child was unable to complete a task, the level of support required to perform a task, how a child responded when accommodations were made, and the function of non-traditional responses to stimuli. So when doing judgment-based assessments, these are the things that you are looking for specifically. The purpose of assessments, screening. So it provides a first indication that a child may have potential problems. Eligibility. This is a team assessment to determine if the child needs special services. Program planning. Develop an education plan and marks progress, and then monitoring gathers information about the progress of the child, so specific outcomes, goals, and short-term objectives. Okay, so once all the assessments are made, you want to form certain plans, and there's IFSPs and IEPs. So first we'll talk about the Individualized Family Service Plan. So the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, in 2004 required that the IFSP be made for any child from birth to age 3 who has been determined to need special education services. The child and the family are co-beneficiaries of these services. The IFSP is developed immediately following the assessment, and the plan must be reviewed by the family every 6 months. So here are some principles of the IFSP. So it's family-based approach. The child is dependent on the family, or depends on the family. Family is defined in a manner that reflects diversity, knowing that each family has their own values, so respecting their diversity. Foster supportive child-family interactions, flexibility for family needs, and promote inclusion into the community. Recognize that it takes more than one agency or discipline to meet the diverse and complex needs. So these are just some key things that you need to keep in mind when creating an IFSP. So an IEP is required once a child is 36 months and is attending preschool. This document outlines a child's individualized instructional program, provides a basis for evaluation, and offers regular opportunity for communication between professionals involved in the child's education. Person-centered and encourage involvement from the family. Must contain information for the parents and describe how a child's disability affects the child's participation in appropriate activities. And then the last thing that the chapter talked about was the Individual Activity Objective Matrix, the IAOM, and I thought this was pretty neat. So it's a planning aid used to help professionals track the teaching and acquisition of objectives. By targeting a child's objectives, the matrix is able to identify adjustments to activities and/or routines to teach that child the appropriate skills or behaviors. It helps keep track of what to teach, as well as whether the child is learning the targeted skills and behaviors. So it shows whether interventions are actually effective. There's 3 steps to this, and it's identifying the skills to be taught, teach identified objectives, outcomes during activities and routines, and determine how and when monitoring will occur. Before we get to the discussion that I have for us, there were several pictures and figures in the chapter that I think are very important to look over. They had, a lot of examples of IEPs and IFSPs. There's a case study at the beginning, and so they kind of go off of that to do their examples. And then there's a pretty cool example of an IAOM in the back on page 75 that was pretty neat to look at. So my first discussion is, have you ever been in a classroom where yourself or a teacher has used an IAOM planning aid? How is it beneficial, and could you see yourself using this method? And then also, what do you find is the most important strategy when developing an IFSP or an IEP? There are several strategies that are used to develop those, and all are important, but I think it would be interesting to see, which ones we value the most. So have a nice week. Thanks.